For 43 years of his life, Edgar Cayce would lie down on a couch, place his hands on his solar plexus, and fall into a self-induced trance. In this state, he traveled through space and time, foretelling wars, diagnosing illnesses, and in some of his most intriguing readings, rewriting history.
When we consider Edgar Cayce's predictions, it's also interesting to look at some of the retrocognitive statements he made, looking back into history and making statements about things you wouldn't find in the history book.
The sleeping Cayce seemed to know secrets about our past that only the most high-tech instruments and years of excavating could reveal. Long before the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered in 1947, Cayce spoke of an ancient sect of Judaism, the Essenes, which experts believed was made up exclusively of men.
Edgar Cayce spoke about the Essenes as a community that included men, women, and children.
Experts remained dubious, but in the 1950s, years after Cayce's death, archaeologists uncovered skeletons of Essene women near the site of the Dead Sea Scrolls.
With geology, there are some interesting things as well. Cayce suggested that at one time the Nile River flowed in the opposite direction and actually emptied directly into the Atlantic Ocean.
Amazingly, in the 1980s, satellite images from the space shuttle revealed unknown river valleys beneath the driest parts of the Sahara. More imaging and on-site exploration revealed that the Nile may indeed have once flowed through the Sahara and into the Atlantic.
In Edgar Cayce's lifetime, much of what he said about lost civilizations, ancient worlds, was regarded as science fiction. It really wasn't until this century, and literally the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls, that people have begun to look much harder and realistically at these readings as perhaps, well, maybe these aren't so far-fetched.
Probably the most astounding historical readings Cayce gave had to do with the lost land of Atlantis.
Atlantis, from Edgar Cayce's perspective, was the first great Eden on the earth. It predates the Eden that we know of between the Tigris and the Euphrates, the Eden of Adam and Eve. Edgar Cayce saw Atlantis as a massive continent in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. At the time, the individuals that populated the area had a deep understanding of the forces of the universe and could actually harness some of these powers to use devices such as flying machines and crystals and so forth.
But according to the readings, the Atlanteans abused their power over nature, and Atlantis disappeared in a cataclysmic disaster some 10,000 years ago. Cayce's most specifically timed prophecies said portions of Atlantis would rise again in 1968. It did not. But that year, a strange formation known as the Bimini Road was discovered in the Bahamas.
Most geologists think it's beach rock. Beach rock is rock that fractures parallel to the shore. Well, this is parallel to the shore, but the end of it curves around in a kind of a J shape, so that's unusual.
No one has gathered any conclusive evidence yet that proves Atlantis lies beneath the Bahamas. But according to Cayce, Bimini isn't our only link to the lost continent. Before the final destruction, he said, Atlanteans hid records of their earliest history in other locations.
One was in the Yucatan Peninsula. The other was off the right front paw of the Sphinx in Egypt.
In the early 1990s, Dr. Robert Schoch, a professor of geology at Boston University, conducted geological and seismic surveys on the Sphinx.
I was not in the business to support Edgar Cayce or any other, I'll call him psychic or prophet. I really knew nothing about him other than his name.
Schoch and his team were about to make an astounding discovery.
We were able to model what was underneath the Great Sphinx. We found under and in front of the left paw of the Sphinx what I believe is a major chamber, maybe up to 25 meters below the surface. Based on its regularity, it looks like it was human carved, and not only is it definitely there, but it seems to have something in it. The way it resonated, the way it ringed, seems to indicate there's something in the chamber.
Is it the Atlanteans' Hall of Records Cayce spoke of? No one has explored it further, And as intriguing as they are, so far Casey's Atlantis prophecies have come up short. But some suggest that it's Casey's method and not his material that will have the most far-reaching effect on our understanding of ourselves and the world around us. In fact, Casey suggested that with practice, we could all do what he did.
I do not believe there is a single individual that does not possess this same ability I have. If they would only be willing to pay the price of detachment from self-interest that it takes to develop those abilities.
Casey was even able to describe where he got the information that came to him in trance. He said it came from the subconscious mind of the individual he was reading for, and from the Akashic records, a universal source of knowledge that held all of the pasts, presents, and unfolding futures of mankind.
Edgar Casey said, ultimately, when you view it from the highest dimension, there is no time and no space. There is no future and no past. It all is occurring in one fascinating moment of expression, but time is an illusion that has purpose.
Casey's readings also suggested that we could impact the future. This idea was shared by another great prophet, Nostradamus.
Edgar Casey and Nostradamus both shared the belief that the future was malleable, changeable. It's also true that if you're a prophet, you're also a propagandist. You're trying to persuade, often, the future to change.
Why would Casey want the future to change? And what cataclysmic prophecies did he foresee for the new millennium?
Edgar Casey made some extraordinary and spectacular earth change predictions, something that would be catastrophic, probably even beyond what we could imagine.